Awesome. Good afternoon. Thanks for sticking with us. This session is titled Here to Compete, the Paralympic Sports Takeover. Our presenters are Will Stevens, a content creator with Trailer Park Sports Network, Stephen Morrissey, USA Equestrian, and Olivia Barker, United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. Paralympians have been described by the media as participants and not competitors. This sentiment shifted after the 2024 Paralympic Games, where increased coverage and incredible competition showcased Paralympic sports at the highest level. Paralympians are ready to be recognized and showcased in mainstream sports discussions. This panel will cover the rapid growth and visibility of Paralympic sports and its relationship to inclusion and belonging, as well as adaptive sports on a domestic and international level. Take it away.
Yay! Okay, so we have some awesome panelists here today. Will Stevens at the end. This is first panel, same with Olivia. So of course we're doing an activity. Today is World Nutella Day, so I would like you to turn to someone next to you and discuss why you like Nutella or why you don't. Ready, go. Oh, yeah. Wow, what an exciting topic. Okay. Anyone, team, I don't care. Team, I don't care. Who is team Nutella? Who is like, get that away from me? Valid. Okay, well, we are going to get started because that has to do with everything. So welcome to the panel. I'm Janelle. I will be moderating today. We are going to go down the panel, introduce yourselves. You can do a fun fact. You can do anything. And Will wants to start. So Will is going to start.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Will Stevens from Trailer Park Sports Network on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. I am partnered with the Paralympic Collective Culture. Shout out to Brenna, Ryan, all of them, Chuck Aoki, and Danny as well. This is my first panel, so I am a tad nervous. I would like to start out with that. I'd also like to say thank you to my mom and my dad. I know they're tuning in right now. I love you guys. This is thanks to y'all, so I love y'all. I am from North Alabama, and Trailer Park Sports Network is not like a random thing. I live in a trailer, and part of the reason I've named it Trailer Park Sports Network is to rewrite the narrative on people that live inside of trailers. And in the process, I got really involved in parasports as well. So now I'm also trying to rewrite the narrative around para-athletes and adaptive athletes as well. So I am, yeah.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Olivia Barker. I am working at the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee as the manager of internally managed sports. I oversee sports that have relinquished their certification or have been decertified for whatever reason, or have been added to the Olympic or Paralympic program that did not have a viable NGB. So I serve as an NGB, multiple NGBs under the USOPC umbrella. I do have to state that today, although I work at the USOPC, the views I speak about today are purely my own, and the experiences that I'm sharing today are, again, my own as well. A fun fact, and I'll just keep it close to home, I was a Division I swimmer at Indiana University, so that kind of sparked my interest in working in sport. I thought I would get far away from sport after competing. However, in working in the behavioral therapy field, I found that working with children with disabilities and combining my love for sport could turn into a job. So it's crazy to work primarily under the US Paralympics, and it's a dream come true. So.
Hi everyone, Stephen Morrissey. I work for US Equestrian. My title is the Managing Director of Sport Logistics and Non-Olympic Disciplines. So half of my position is focused on sport logistics for all of our international disciplines at the national governing body for equestrian sport, as well as overseeing any of our international disciplines that are not within the Olympics. I don't have a fun fact, but I want to highlight our Paralympic team from this past summer. It was a full female team with 9 medals and 5 of them being gold.
Okay, so for our first question, it's to Stephen. Do horses have passports? I'm sorry. Do they actually? Can I ask?
Horses do have passports. They're not the same as a human passport. So they are required to have a passport to compete at the international level. They get it sometimes when they're younger or when they start going from the national level to the international level in competition. It includes all of their vaccination records, as well as their breeding and their identification, their microchip number, because they're all microchipped to compete internationally. And they need that to move across country borders.
Okay, so that had nothing to do with anything, but I thought that would be a fun thing for us to listen to. So, was that a question I had? Yes. So thank you.
Was that on the sheet? 'Cause
No.
I didn't read your sheet.
No.
So.
No. I was just thinking about it. All right, so let's dive into the topic. So we got the Olympics, we got the Paralympics. Can we talk a little bit about the relationship between those two? What are some differences maybe in regards to marketing, fan engagement, maybe funding even? So would love for y'all to provide some context to that.
Yeah, I'll start talking from the NGB perspective. So at US Equestrian, we're really integrated between the able-bodied sports and the parasports. So we don't have separate organizations as some NGBs do. We don't have separate staff working on it. We do have staff that are dedicated to parasports, but they're within the entire team of our sport department. So everything that we do, our budget, our funding is separate that we receive sometimes, depending on the funding source. Sometimes it's together. But we try to do a really good job to make sure that there's equity between the able-bodied disciplines in equestrian and the parasports.
I'm going to take this question a bit differently in just how I work with Olympic and Paralympic athletes. I do support sports on both sides of the house, and I work with the athletes in the same exact way. I think we're all human. Our Paralympic athletes at times need accommodations that our Olympic athletes do not, but ultimately they're still athletes. I like to call, and they will appreciate this because they gave this terminology to me, cats with egos. Both sides are, and their athleticism is incredible. So that's my side.
I will speak on this from the side of somebody who has been on social media and has talked about this on social media. The perception of the two are quite different, and I don't necessarily like that. I noticed over the time of covering the Olympics and then covering the Paralympics, people view one as the greatest competition on earth, and then people view the other one as participants, or people who are participating in a competition, which that I would honestly argue that they are both equally as hard, and honestly, I would say that the Paralympics are a even crazier level of competition. You have people who have been through crazier things in their lives, and they're working, in my opinion, harder to achieve these same things that their Olympic counterparts are working to achieve. And the Olympic athletes get praised and they get loved for it, and the Paralympic athletes just kind of get a, hey, congratulations, you did that. And the Olympic athletes are posted on television, and they're everywhere. You see them 50,000 times on social media, but the Paralympics didn't get posted as much on ESPN. We won our third consecutive wheelchair basketball gold medal. ESPN did not post that one time.
Sorry, I have one more other point to make. So yesterday, I was visiting a facility here in Colorado that is part of one of our able-bodied disciplines in equestrian. And when I told them why I was here, the coach and owner of the facility said, "That's fantastic. Is equestrian being added to the Paralympics?" So I think to Will's point, it's interesting how the lack of education, even within my own sport, equestrian, not knowing that we had massive success at the Paralympics, and I thought had great coverage in terms of our team specifically, and that's clearly not reaching out there onto the Olympic side of things.
Olivia, can you talk a little bit about how the USOC turned into the USOPC?
Yeah.
And is that the same internationally?
Yeah, so for those of you who do not know, the USOPC just added the P in 2019, so it's like yesterday. Sarah Hirschland put that forward along with Julie Delucier, who was the chief of US Paralympics at the time, and Basically, it was to integrate, to show equity across the board to all community partners as well as outside stakeholders, internal stakeholders, to show that we are one organization. What was the second part of your question?
Is this the same internationally?
So it's actually not the same internationally. We are a rare NOC NPC combination. Not every country or nation does this. We're one of few. I don't know how many there are, but I do know that a lot of countries do want to integrate into one organization as well.
So 2019.
2019.
Yeah, you're right. That was yesterday.
Yesterday.
Okay, so we'll keep going. Olivia, I'm gonna throw this question to you. So Paralympians have often been described as participants rather than competitors. There was a Paralympic Games promotional hashtag. It was hashtag not playing games that they used. Why do you think this sentiment has occurred in the media? And then do you think this sentiment is shifting? Did it shift after the 2024 games?
Yeah.
Did you see anything?
I did not see the hashtag until you brought it to my attention. When we're at the games, it's difficult to look at social media in that way. And my fellow colleagues in the room, you understand. But I just wanted to share that adaptive recreation in the recreational space in general, right? Recreation, we think participation. We want people to enjoy sport just as much as we do, as people working within the realm of sport. But adaptive recreation, again, is within the recreational space. As previously spoken about in another presentation right before this one, there was discussions about how the NCAA framework does not include adaptive sports across the board. So again, adaptive recreation to participate. I think we've gotten into the groove of things, especially with social media, that states that, you know, athletes are just participating. But if this is the only means of getting athletes with disabilities engaged in Paralympic sport, you know, what do we coin that as? How do we define that? And so I wanted to mention that because I think it's extremely important of another reason as to why we are stuck in the mindset of participation over competitors. I'm not sure if media has changed completely after 2024. I hope that because we will have a home games in LA 2028, that the sentiment changes, that we are using inclusive language, and we are bringing, you know, the Olympic and Paralympic movement to the United States in the way that it should be shown to the world.
I'll take it. I would say that the athletes have helped shift it more than anybody has helped shift it, more than the media, more than anything else. The athletes, the way that they were able to share their stories and show just how hard it is to be a Paralympic athlete throughout the games, before the games, after the games, talking about how it feels when you're done being an athlete and you have to go back home, and showing what it's like. They shifted the narrative, and they're doing more work than anybody else is out there doing. The media is trying, but they're not doing as much as they should. And I feel like the Paralympic official page isn't doing a great job of helping in a way. There's more memes than actual content about the athletes being athletes, and that's not something that is going to help shift the narrative. They're kind of just like showing videos of them with funny sounds, and that's not gonna help grow the games. It's not.
Yeah, I think to go on those points, I think the media needs to do a better job of balancing. The media likes to show human stories, which is great, but we need to make sure, and this came up in the last session as well, but make sure that we're not just talking about para-athletes, that they're inspirational and that it's so exciting and we love watching them because they're para-athletes, and more so that we like watching it for the sport.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all, for sharing. So I'm going to read some stats on digital engagement from the 2024 Paralympics for everyone. So Peacock, Paris was the most streamed Paralympic Games of all time with 207 million total minutes, 11 times more than there were in Tokyo. By day 2 of the Paris Paralympics, the Games had surpassed the entire live minutes total for the entire Tokyo Paralympics. And then there was a 24% increase in social engagements as compared to previous Paralympics with over 16 million social engagements about the Paralympics. And then the Paralympics generated the highest ever Olympic and Paralympic advertising revenue for NBC Universal, and there was a 60% increase in ad sales for the Paralympic Games. So those numbers sound cool. So that sounds cool. But this is my question. They sound great, but do you think, we're gonna go back to this, do you think you saw the change that all these stats reflected that I just read?
I think it goes back to the point of what was the actual content that was being put out there. Yeah. So that's the first point, and then what's the comparison to the Olympic Games? Mm-hmm. And what do we do to continue to grow the numbers for the Paralympics? It's great, fantastic that it's grown since Tokyo, but how do we keep growing that?
Being the social media guy, I went through my numbers from the Olympics and I went through my numbers through the Paralympics. Throughout the Olympic Games, I amassed 9.3 million views on my Olympic videos. During the Paralympics, I amassed 6.1 million views. There is a 3.2 million drop-off, but that is less of a drop-off than I expected to see throughout the games, and a lot of the people had a genuine interest. And maybe it's because everything, the way that I talked about it, I tried to just show them the sports and then teach them as I was going, because I was trying to learn as I went. Everything that I saw was new to me. Almost every single event was new to me. And I felt like the community that I have somewhat built has a genuine interest for parasports and adaptive sports. There are some people that, you know, they're obviously kind of just there for the stories. They want to know, oh, well, why is this person a para-athlete? That's not my concern. My concern is their athletic ability and what they have accomplished as an athlete. Everything after that is, you know, that's an extra part of the story. But what they've accomplished as an athlete is the most important part. So the fact that my Paralympic coverage only had 3.2 million less in the same amount of time is kind of surprising to me. And I feel like this is going to continue to grow. The Paralympic Games, adaptive sports, I feel like they will continue to grow as long as people continue to talk about them as sports and as athletes instead of, this is a sad sob story, oh, and they just so happen to be an athlete as well. No, it's the other way around. They're an athlete and they just so happen to be disabled. And that's always how it will be.
Yeah, Will, I'm gonna ask you a little bit more. So how did you learn about the Paralympics? How did you learn about the Olympics this past year? What was your experience consuming it as a person? And what is it like now?
My journey to becoming a big fan of the Paralympics was a little interesting. I was covering the Olympics because I'm just a sports guy. I love sports. I say this all the time. It could be underwater basket weaving. If it's competitive, I will be there watching it. So people during the Olympics, everybody was like, "You're going to give the same energy to the Paralympics, right? You're going to give the same energy." And I was like, "Well, I have to. I guess it kind of is unfortunate, but I'd somewhat forgotten that it existed at a time, you know. But as soon as it pops up, I'm like, all right, cool. I need to learn everything that I can about this. And a video by Chuck Aoki, a wheelchair rugby player for Team USA, popped up on my For You page. And it was along the lines of being a Paralympian during the Olympics is kind of weird because it's like being at this party. Everybody is having fun, having a great time, but in the back of your head, you know you have a party coming up. And you just hope that everybody shows up to your party and shows you the exact same energy and has fun just like they did at the first party. And that kind of like broke me a little bit in a way where I was like, I never thought about it that way. It had never came across my head, and maybe it's just because I'm only 23 years old and I didn't tune into the 2021 Olympics. I was in college playing football myself, so the sports weren't really on my mind. But the more I learned, the more I engaged, I was like, dude, this is the greatest competition on earth. This is easily the greatest competition on earth. It's not like watching the Olympics where you watch the 100 one time, where you have different classifications. You watch everything multiple different times. There's multiple different versions of everything. They have adaptations to everything. There's so much to learn. There's so much to dive into. And learning about it kind of changed my life. It changed my perspective on athletes. It changed my perspective on life as a whole. You know, like there's so much more that goes into being an athlete than even I knew as an athlete myself. I played football my entire life. I played until my sophomore year, but still, there's so much more that went into it than I ever imagined.
That's so awesome. So what was the response like during the Paralympics?
It was very interesting. There was, for the first day or two, people weren't really catching on, but the more I went in depth, the more I learned myself, the more I was able to explain to people, the more interested they got themselves, because I was able to explain what we were seeing, even the classification system. That was probably the biggest hoop to jump through, was learning the classification system. There's so much. There really is a lot to learn, and it's not an easy thing to learn, but the more that you learn, the more you realize, like, oh, whoa, like this is just genuinely the greatest competition on earth. And there's a lot of people that have reached out, and they've said they've learned a lot, and they didn't even realize, like, oh, whoa, I didn't realize, like, there's this many different types of swimming. Like, there's this many different classifications of swimming. That is so cool, you know. And the response seemed really well. It seemed very, it was honestly incredible to see. I didn't think people were going to care as much as they did, and they cared 10 times more than I ever imagined.
Awesome. Thanks, Will. We'll transition to the next question. So, Olivia, you said, and Stephen, you work directly with athletes and help support them. There is always, and especially right now, huge discussion and political action regarding DEI, inclusivity, accessibility. So how do you respond to this? And how do you support para-athletes during this time when they may have a lot of questions and there's a lot of unknowns?
Yeah, so for me, there's two parts to this question. So, of course, the new administration is a concern. First off, based on just DEI in general and ensuring that we are continuing to create spaces that are inclusive of everyone. And then secondary, another main concern I know for our athletes are government-assisted programs that help our athletes continue to participate in sport as major athletes. So I don't have the answer to that. I think time will tell. I think as far as from the NGB perspective, we're going to continue to do what we've done always. It's not going to change what we do, but I think we'll have our eye on the changes in the government and see what we need to fill in the gaps for our athletes.
Yeah, same. We have received several questions, especially from our veteran athletes with concerns, questions, and unfortunately we cannot answer them. So it's just giving them reassurance, asking them what they need specifically, and just waiting for answers.
Yeah. So you've talked a lot about how Paralympics, there's a bit of a learning curve, whether it's classifications, whether it's knowing what certain accommodations to make for athletes. I think we've kind of discussed this before the panel, but there's a lot of people that are kind of scared to talk about the Paralympics because they don't want to say the wrong thing, or they're worried that they may say something wrong and it's going to be the totally wrong terminology, and then someone's going to post about it and something's going to happen. So what do you say to encourage people, whether it's to talk about the Paralympics, to participate in content, to engage with it? What would you say to folks that maybe feel that way?
I would ask why they're scared. There's nothing to be scared of, and I understand the concern, especially when using, correct terminology, how we describe persons with disabilities. Like, that's a huge barrier, and I mean, things change all the time. I learn as well, and I think it's important to just share that we are always learning. We can always grow. I will say in my personal life, when I went to Tokyo 2020, that was one of the first or 2021, that was one of the first games where Paralympic sport was actually airing on TV. You could watch everything. It was easily accessible. And so I made a group chat with my family and friends. And it was the first time that they ever watched goalball. And they asked bizarre questions because they didn't understand what the sport was and what impairments the athletes had. But it's a learning curve, and now it's their favorite sport to watch. They watched it in Paris, and some of my family actually went to the games in person this year. So it was great to just see, my personal advocating to my family and friends, which is, I think, more of an easy in than external folks. But yeah, if I ever meet anyone who's interested or says something or mentions something, I always tell them a little bit about what we do. with the USOPC.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. When I first got asked to be on the panel, I was concerned that I was like, am I really the right person to be sitting on this panel? And then we had our touch base, and I was like, no, I do know what I'm talking about. So I think being like that fear of saying the wrong thing or being in a discussion that you might not feel like you're the one who should be leading that discussion is a reality for many people. But looking at it from a different perspective of the conversation has to be had to elevate para sports, and my feelings on it were if I wasn't going to do it, then who was? So that's why I'm here. So I think the conversation has to continue, and people should not be afraid because intent is important. So you can always learn something and do better the next time, regardless of if you say the wrong thing.
I will be completely honest. When I started covering the Paralympics, I was terrified because I didn't want to say the wrong thing, and starting to grow a platform on social media where during the Olympics your videos are getting millions of views. You're kind of terrified of saying the wrong thing and somebody clipping that and hating on you for it. But like Steven said, the intent is the most important thing. And even when I did say the wrong thing, somebody would come to me and say, hey, that is not how you talk about this. You should say this instead. And I would leave that video up and then stitch it and then say the correct thing after the fact and correct myself, because you have to be able to correct yourself. That is a big thing, and you have to be willing to learn. There's a lot to learn, and there's a lot of discussions you have to have, and there's a lot of difficult conversations you have to have, but you have to be able to have those conversations. And that was definitely a hoop to jump through for me, was just being open to learning everything. And the more I learned, the more I tried to talk to people. I know I bothered Chuck throughout the entire Paralympic Games, and talking his head off, asking him millions of questions, but I had to learn, and I had to reach out to as many different Paralympians or just people who knew about the games more than I did, so that I could learn, so that I could sit on social media and talk about it without disrespecting the games or disrespecting the athletes. And that's a really, really important part of it.
Thank you. So for folks on the panel that identify as able-bodied, we can tell that y'all love the Paralympics and think it's super cool. Goalball is probably the best sport in the games. You will not change my mind. So what are some lessons that you have learned or you have brought people along for about allyship during this time while working with Paralympics? And then why do more able-bodied folks need to be involved in the Paralympic movement?
The number one thing that I have to educate people on is that it is the Paralympics, not the Paralympics. That is the number one comment that I get, and I always have to correct that one. And I don't necessarily understand why people want to call it the Paralympics. They are two separate things, and it's always going to be that way. And it is always the big one for me, is educating people on the Paralympics. There's no O in there.
Well, first I want to address your favorite sport. Have you ever seen Equestrian?
Yes, because it's awesome.
Okay.
And I apologize. I love every single sport. And
Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to address that first. So in my role with logistics and planning for games, I do Olympics and Paralympics at the same time. So I treat both the same, and my main goal is making sure that I create an environment for all athletes where all they have to do is think about their sport. They don't have to think about transportation. They don't have to think about, in our case, we're always in hotels. We're not usually in the village. They don't have to think about their housing. They don't have to think about their meals. They don't have to think about where everything is. So we're very thankful. So US Equestrian, we have the resources to do many site visits ahead of a game. So I think we, in total with all of our staff, probably went to our venue in Paris 6 times ahead of the games for multiple days, and scouting out the entire venue as it got built, making sure that things were in order at the venue, as well as the surrounding town that we stayed in for our hotel. Specific to Paralympics, we make sure to that point that things are accessible. We had major conversations in between the Olympics and Paralympics, which was nice that we had the break then to talk to the venue organizer, because there were many things about the venue that during the Olympics we noticed were not accessible for our athletes. And they actually made changes to the venue. They made changes to access points that based on the conversations we had, and we had to push hard to make those changes, as you can imagine, with a venue that's already done, went through the entire Olympics well, and they thought they were all done, and then we came into the room and they were not very happy. But the conversation has to be had. I think in total, like to conclude my thoughts, is that creating a space for success is the most important thing for all athletes, not just para-athletes.
That's so good. I would say, you know, in working with both Olympic and Paralympic athletes, you have to meet them where they are. And that's with, I think, any person in this room. Like, if I meet you, I need to meet you where you are and not vice versa. And so specifically with some of our Paralympic athletes, you know, oftentimes people want to hover and to go right in for support, and that's not what our athletes need. Our athletes need to be asked if they need help, and they will come and ask you for help. So that's why it's so important to build open and trusting relationships with athletes, especially Paralympic athletes. If you don't have that trusting relationship with them, they're not going to come to you with their concerns or their questions. Yeah, so allyship is super important in that respect.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all, for answering that.
Had one more point.
Love it.
To your point about the hovering, we enact a policy with our athletes, and it's individual to each athlete, of blackout periods where their family and friends can't talk to them. And sometimes that extends to certain people can't talk to them at all during the entire games. And it's something that our athletes have communicated to us that they really appreciate, because they don't have to have the difficult conversation with somebody that's a loved one that they just cannot handle during that stressful time. So it made me think of that when you talked about hovering people, that it's something that we additionally do for our athletes.
Love it. So we'll end this before we do some questions. We know the Paralympics and the Paralympians and all these awesome folks are ready to be recognized, showcased, want to be seen, want to be heard. What action do you think is needed to take to continue to grow that?
Yeah, I think to the point before about continuing to grow the media coverage and the correct media coverage of parasports and the Paralympics, and continuing to grow those numbers will only increase things like funding and visibility and the number of people competing in our sports, which then grow the sports, and it's good for everyone, right? So I think that's when I think about the question, the main goal for parasports.
Yeah. Blink. Yeah. I mean, I would say that, you know, culture change starts from the top, wherever that is, in whatever organization that those watching or here are working at. So a name change isn't the only way we can make an impact, and not the only way that we can represent our Paralympic movement specifically. So I think it's extremely important that, people are emulating what they truly believe in, and I think they do, but maybe they need to lean a little harder into adaptive sport a little bit more.
A big point, and back to what Steven said earlier, the athletes are athletes, and they need to be portrayed as such. It is not some Hope Corps video for you to use for, you know, likes and, you know, engagement. These are athletes, and their Olympic counterparts are talked about as athletes, and I do not understand why it cannot be the same way on both sides. And I also would say that more people just need to educate themselves on adaptive sports. And just in the time of being here, getting to try sled hockey and wheelchair basketball, I've been humbled, like in many ways that I cannot explain to anybody else. And I feel like more people should get out and try adaptive sports, and you will gain an immense amount of respect for all of these athletes, because it is way harder than it looks. All of it is way harder than it looks. And I feel like that would help a lot of people too.
Awesome. So we got some time for Q&A. Would anyone like to give us a cue or a comment or anything?
Oh, okay, for Zoom folks, okay. So I actually have two. One is NBC's coverage, good. Not to the Channel 4 level at the UK. What do we do to get there in time for 2028? Does the USOPC have leverage to get that stepped up a little bit?
I can speak on behalf of myself as a person who works there, not the organization. The continued emphasis and conversation around 28 has just ramped up exponentially after 2024, and specifically after the 2024 Paralympics. And why I say that is there's been more conversation of, okay, how are we engaging domestically our fans in Paralympic sport? So whether that is, okay, when we have a championship for Paralympic swimming, we want to make sure that we actually broadcast that. How are we doing that, and how are we making that accessible? So those are conversations that are happening now. And so the end goal is that Peacock, I don't know if anyone tuned into Gold Medal Zone. Gold Medal Zone was amazing. Or you could watch 4 different screens at once. That was kind of the, I want to say, from my understanding, it was the start of what 2028 can be. And so I think that hearing these conversations from people that are way above me and make really big decisions has shown that they're investing more in Peacock, they're investing more in NBC, they're investing more in the different digital platforms, whether that's YouTube, podcasts, TikTok, or anything else. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see them be able to help shift that narrative, that conversation we just had, to one that, you know, the UK came out recently, and because of Channel 4's coverage, there's now exponential changes in perception of disability across Europe and in the UK. So I would just hope that that would be a goal. We've talked about media a lot in this conversation, and in the last one, that would just be something that people with disabilities in this country would love to come away with as far as a legacy from the Games. And to not be fearful of talking about disability. Sean, you were probably there, and I host an annual virtual conference called Adapted Sport Labs Leadership and Business Symposium. 4 sessions or 3 sessions each day. I can tell you half of them, people talked about coaches who are fearful of working with kids with disabilities, coaches who are fearful of working with women, adult women, in hardcore sports like goalball and basketball and rugby. And we also had fear from corporate leadership, fearful of including adaptive apparel design, innovative designs, and products. So fear is a big factor. So not sure if any of you can take that back to the leaders that be. But I think that's huge in our country, and we need to move beyond it. Anyways, so soapbox. My next one is, Olivia, you talked about cultural change. I know there's been changes in the Paralympic leadership position right now. Who's going to step in and be our NPC point person moving forward with the Games coming up?
Yeah, I believe Sarah Hirschland is taking on the role that was previously held by the former chief of U.S. Paralympics and internally managed sports. So hopefully, again, that integration piece I know is a goal, and hopefully with her leadership there in doing both the Olympic and the Paralympic side will prove to be beneficial.
I'm a director of DEI within the Olympic movement, and so I know I have a direct corollary or a direct role in impacting lives that are of our adaptive athletes or diversely abled athletes, as I like to call them. And so I'm curious, for those maybe who don't work in a DEI role, what can we do walking away from this space right now to enact change immediately. We may not have the role to be in a commercial department. We may not be able to change the magnitude of the way that our sports are covered, but we can do something. So I guess I want to know from those who may be sitting in any type of vantage point in this room, what can we do to advocate and to continue to support our adaptive athletes within our spaces?
I'll start. One of my favorite things our DE&I department did prior to the games is go through the International Paralympic Committee's videos on sport. They were like 2 minutes and 30 seconds or so. Hey, this is goal ball. This is what you need to know. These are the fast facts. And so we started there. And so the best part, though, is as someone that does not currently work in a DEI role, I took that to my next meeting. I took that to my next people. I said, hey, you better tune in. Have you seen goal wall? Have you seen Equestrian? Like, here's what you need to look at. And so I thought that was a really simple way for me, who did not necessarily have the power to change, the game, change adaptive sport, do that, but I had the power to share. And so that was something that was really easy. It was free for me to do. And I felt like that was one way that I could help support our Paralympians.
Something I forgot to mention, so Steven works at USA Equestrian, and they are an integrated program, right? The Olympic and Paralympic sports live under one umbrella, which I think has proven to be extremely successful for that NGB. And I know that is an ongoing goal that is currently occurring within the Paralympic movement right now. So I would say when that time comes, hopefully soon, that you embrace both sides of the house and try to learn from them. I know, and I'm speaking to you, Leland, at USA Swimming. So you, when you reach that point, you're going to be someone who is driving that change automatically, and they're going to be looking at you for support, and just encouraging those around you to also, look at the importance of the Paralympic side of your potential future house. Yeah.
All right, anything else? Any other questions, comments? Anyone want to ask Will his engagement for TikTok? I don't know. Yeah, horse questions. Anyone want to know about a horse? Yeah.
I guess it's a little, so I watched a triathlon is the one I'm thinking of, but like watching the triathlon coverage, it was about the transitions when the athlete was struggling with the prosthetic or with getting on the bike. It was the transitions that was the highlight of that coverage. The start, the transitions, and then the end, which when I compared it to the other triathlon coverage is maybe not dissimilar, but it certainly was that way, which I guess, maybe Will, I ask you, how do you engage an audience, or what would you suggest that they do differently in coverage to not highlight maybe some of the fantastical part of Paralympics when it is the athleticism you're trying to go after, but also what makes people tune in? I'm thinking of the archery that went crazy viral. So like it was a crazy viral clip. I don't know what audiences loved about that clip. Was it the amazing athleticism of the archery, or was it the fantastic?
You referencing Matt Stutzman?
I don't know his name. I'm sorry, but he was. Yeah.
I forget his name.
The one.
The Turkish guy who went viral.
Well, no, the one leg.
Matt
Yeah,
Matt,
phenomenal.
Matt.
Like, so I don't know if my question's clear, but it's like it's a little bit of the fantastical that makes people tune in, but that's not what you want to highlight about athletes necessarily. So how do you change that narrative, maybe?
That is a little bit of an interesting question, seeming as it's the triathlon itself. It's about highlighting their athleticism and not their oh well look at them, they're trying to go from one position to another, and now like you're basically covering only the transition instead of the part where maybe they're running or maybe they're swimming, or instead of highlighting they're like, oh my gosh, like did you not see the time that they swam? Instead of highlighting that part, you're just like waiting until they get to the end and you're like, oh my gosh, look at them, look at this transition, it's taking this amount of time. how about they switch that, and like whenever you watch in the Olympics, they're sitting there like commentating their run, they're commentating the bike, and they're like, oh my gosh, look how much time he's made up on this. They're not doing the same. They're kind of just highlighting the others. So I would say it's all about highlighting their athleticism and showing like, hey, they came out of the water at this time, but look how much time they've made up on the leader. Look how much time they have gained. You know, like, oh my gosh, they've separated themselves by like 10, 15 seconds now. Like they could shift to that instead of the back end.
We are at time. I don't want to speak on behalf of you guys, but I would assume that maybe any extra questions you may be willing to ask in some extra time here. But the next session in this room will be at 4:15, called It's Never Too Late to Champion Your Identity by Erica Rendler, an American cricket athlete. And then after that session, that'll be our last rec center session at 4:15, and we encourage you to join us for the keynote, which will not be at the Touchdown Club. It'll be at the event center across campus right before the basketball game, and that'll be in Bodecker Gym if you're looking for it on maps or anything like that. So a little bit of a hike to get over there, but we'd help anybody else who needs directions. So thank you so much.